Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say. And in this video, I have quite a few encounters where you just don't quite know what it is. And these are from all over the place. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me. Make sure you're hydrated. And let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. When I was younger, I used to live in this really swampy and woodsy part of Florida. There was this creek that I could see from the window in my house. It was one of my favorite places to go and play during this period in my life. So this one time, I was playing in the creek all day with my rain boots on. I run inside for dinner, and I end up forgetting my boots by the creek. By the time I finish supper, it's too dark to go back out to get my boots. Later that night, I wake up to some weird noises. I go out into the kitchen and look out the window. I can see the creek, and I can see my boots outside. Only there's something else there too. Something dark keeps touching the boots, picking them up, setting them down, almost examining them. It's just tall and black, standing on two legs, and it keeps knocking them over, setting them back up, turning them upside down, almost like it's amused by what it's doing. I end up not knowing what to do, so I try to go back to sleep. The next day, my boots were gone, and I never saw them again. I just always thought this was weird, even back then. I know it didn't look like an animal, so I don't know what it was. I'm from a small town on the South Florida Gulf Coast, right in the Everglades. There's something out there, and we don't know what it is. It's a beast of some sort that only comes out at nights under the dark moon and only stays in the swamp. It's not a Florida panther, and it eats gators. We know because we find gators torn in half after a dark moon. Mind you, these gators were 8 to 10 footers of respectable size. Nothing tears a gator in half like that. Nothing natural, at least. We call it the swamp crawler because of the tracks it makes, dragging itself through the mud. No one's seen it, but we heard it plenty of times, and the sound still keeps me up at night, like a low groan and that awful, awful dragging noise. People go missing if they go out into the swamp under the dark moon to search for us. Only two things in the Everglades can kill an alligator: a panther and a python. Pythons constrict and swallow gators whole. Panthers are almost extinct, so we know when one's around, and they don't hurt gators as primary prey. But when they do, they bite the neck to crush the gator. They sure as hell don't tear them in half. It wasn't any other gators doing it either. Gators make claw marks and small gashes from their tail down the middle, but their body is held up by the legs, so their tails are the only thing touching the mud. The swamp crawler makes a huge gash in the ground, like its body lives in the mud, and the claws on the sides have pairs like there's more than one arm and leg each. Each claw looks like a rake with 4 blades. I moved away because I couldn't take the noises anymore. There were people who would have camps way out in the swamps, and they would go missing, with the only evidence being mud all over the floor. I figured at that point it was time to go. I only feel safe with concrete underneath me now. I went on a hunting trip, just me and my brother. It was in this pop-up camper. The intention was to hunt and fish, but we saw nothing all day or during the afternoon. So, late into the afternoon, early into the evening, we decided to take out our fishing poles and open a couple beers. Now I'm just sipping on a couple because I don't like getting drunk in unfamiliar areas, but my brother just downs quite a few of them, and by 9 or 10 p.m. he's drunk. So I help him over to the camper and he goes to sleep pretty quickly. I clean up a bit and then I go to lay down, and the rest of the evening and night is uneventful. This is until about 4 a.m. I'm awoken from my sleep by this really loud breathing or wheezing. I laugh and say to the darkness, "My rifle's loaded, dumbass, don't make me use it," thinking that it was my brother playing a prank on me. It gets louder and then louder. I decide this is annoying, so I'm going to kick his ass. I get up to walk over to the other side of the camper. I end up kicking something big, hairless, and fleshy. And no, this is not a dick joke, I swear. I freak out and I turn around to grab my gun in the pitch black. All of a sudden, the camper door slams open. I hear more than one foot or hand scurrying away. I jump to the door and try to find out what the hell it was. There's no light due to this being the middle of nowhere, private property. I still think in the back of my head that it's my brother, so I turn on the light to see if he's gone. He's not. He's just there, snoring away. I wake him up and tell him what happened. He says that we should find it because we're armed and we didn't see anything at all earlier in the day. I open the door and I shine the flashlight around. There's distinctive prints all around the camper that look like hands heading into the woods. I don't know if this thing was walking on its hands or what, but they all had 6 fingers. But it looked like it barely lifted up its limbs to walk because it kind of had a sliding look to it. Now, we've obviously never seen tracks like this before. We stay awake until morning with all the windows open, looking for anything that might be watching us from the darkness. Nothing happens though. We leave that morning. It could have been something normal, but I don't know. 6 fingers, something walking on its hands. I wish I could have seen it, but it was too dark. This didn't happen to me, it happened to my mom. It's a story that she'll tell me or any one of my friends or girlfriends whenever the occasion arises. So, she was 26 in 1987 when this happened. She was camping with friends and some cousins by Taylor Falls in Minnesota. The group gets the idea to play hide and seek in the woods at night. The rules were, if you were found, you just had to go back to the camp. There were 11 people in total. 7 had been found, 1 was seeking. My mom was still hiding with 2 others. They weren't hiding together, but they all knew where each other was hiding. Her cousin was the one who was seeking. Her and the 2 others didn't get found at all. They waited for like half an hour, so they all decided to head back to the camp, wondering why the cousin stopped looking. The cousin looks confused and is pale. She said that she saw somebody standing in the moonlight with their arms crossed, standing straight as an arrow. She wasn't sure who it was. She went to tag them, and when she went over to tag them, in the time it took her to walk over, whoever it was considerably farther away. This same thing happened a couple more times until the cousin got angry and reached out to punch the person. Her arms went straight through the other person. The person, who she still could not make out, laughed like a giggle and then ran off further into the woods. This obviously scared the hell out of her, so she runs back to the camp. And then 15 minutes later is when my mom and the 2 other cousins had showed up. And Mom talked about how she did see the person, but she thought that it was one of the other cousins being dumb, standing out in the open like that. They didn't really believe that it was a ghost. They thought that it was something else. I'm from West Virginia, and I have never seen anything spooky myself, but my parents have had 2 paranormal experiences that I can think of offhand. I'm terrible at telling stories, but I'll give it a try. My mom and dad, way before I was born, were riding down this hunting trail. It was right around dusk, and it was in a pretty thick forest. There's a dense fog that comes out of nowhere and envelopes everything. They slow down on the road, almost to a crawl, and then, in the headlights, they can see a silhouette in the fog, kind of off to the side. It looks like a person. They have a duster on, and they're wearing a hat, kind of like a cowboy hat. It's slowly moving toward them. I think they said that it looked like that he wasn't even moving his legs, just kind of hovering toward them. He turns and looks at my mom. She looks at him. He asks her if she sees that. She does. They both get really freaked out and just gun it back home. Later on, years later, we were watching one of those paranormal shows on Destination America or something, and the episode was about the Shadow Man, or the Hatman, I don't remember. They swear that that's what it looked like, but the one they saw didn't have the glowy eyes. Lots of random poltergeist activity happened to him right around that time. So, a couple years later, after everything had seemingly died down for good, my dad was driving down the main road with his best friend. The high beams were on because it's nighttime. They were coming around a curve in the road, and suddenly there's this lycanthrope looking thing on the driver's side, standing on both legs, covered in fur. The headlights illuminate its teeth. All the teeth are sharp looking. It's probably 7 to 8 feet tall and just stands there. It watches as they drive by. It doesn't move an inch. My dad speeds up and we drive off. There's a lot of high strangeness in that area. We ended up apparently building our first house right around the area where he saw that thing at. I didn't know this until later. Both of these were in the Greenbrier Valley. My dad told me that the local tribe thought the whole area was cursed. I don't know if it is or not, and I wouldn't even know where to search for it to verify it either way. So this happened in the fall of 2021. It doesn't really have a satisfying conclusion. So, for reference, at my college, we have a very sizable nature preserve. It's not huge, but if you head dead center, it's fairly far away from everyone. So I'm back at college after all of the you-know-what restrictions came off, and I was wanting to go for a hike. It had been a while since I've been here, so I take a usually undisturbed trail that I like to take. I'm coming up on one of the landmarks, and I spot what at first seems to be a collapsed tree. As I get closer, I realize it's a torn-up foundation stone. There's a few of them, and it's heaped for about 30 feet leading back into the woods. It's overgrown and obviously very old, but I've been here many times, and I've never noticed it before. I noticed something white and shiny in a depression on the ground. On closer inspection, it's an old porcelain doorknob. I take some pictures and I start to walk away. I'm not 20 feet away when stuff starts to get odd. This part of the forest is usually quiet because it's pretty secluded, but things get that weird quiet, that tense quiet, and it feels odd even for this section of the forest. The silence is broken by a flock of birds exploding out of the trees a few 100 feet away. I whip around in the direction of the sound and begin to hear something odd. It sounds absolutely massive, slow, rhythmic, wing beats, but that's not the worst sound I hear. I hear distant but loud chatter, and when I say chatter, I mean it sounds like something straight out of a low-budget alien film. Think almost like chirping or clicking in a high-pitched voice, but clearly enunciating like it's a speech pattern. It starts to sound less distant and is accompanied by those wing beats. Now, branches breaking as well. We've got hogs here in Florida, and I can safely assure you that whatever was crashing through the brush was about the same size as a hog, at least. I've been steadily power walking during this, and as I glance over my shoulder, I catch sight of something in the tree line, less than 100 feet away. I didn't see it too well. All I could really make out was that it was grayish in color and probably 6 feet tall. I was absolutely terrified at that point. I immediately whip my head around and all out sprint down the trail. I know these trails fairly well, so the twists and roots don't bother me as I run for a solid minute and a half. I stop, out of breath, and look behind me. I hear and see nothing, aside from the normal forest noises, which have suddenly returned. The rest of the hike was very uneventful. I took a long trail back around to the entrance. The thing that struck me as odd was one of the rangers was out on his ATV, and when he spotted me, he looked like that he had basically crapped his pants. He yelled at me about spraying for weeds and then drove off. I've gone back several times since then, even going so far as to look for the doorknob. The only thing I learned was that the sounds were not wing beats. Every time I returned, I was greeted by those same sounds, which I can only describe as a hollow knocking on the trees. The forest doesn't quite feel the same as it did that day. I don't know what happened. I don't know what I saw, and I don't know why the forest was like that. This keeps me up whenever I think too much about it, and the only friend that believes me is the one that was there. This happened on an Arizona plateau. I don't remember the name of it, but if you've driven from Phoenix to Flagstaff on the 17, you may know what I'm talking about. My friend invited me to go up to his grandfather's ranch on the plateau. He says his grandfather hasn't been there in years and needs to check for squatters and clean up the place. He says that we can go there and shoot and drink and all that stuff and nobody will bother us. I was excited because I had taken a break from all that kind of stuff, and no one was around for miles. We arrived there. We do our initial checks around, and thankfully, there's no squatters. We clean up the house a bit. It's mostly extremely dusty, like piles of dust on the floors. We take a lunch break, and I get talking with my friend's grandfather, and with him. He thanks us for helping him and tells us about how the property was cheap when he bought it. He talks about how he's seen flashing lights and UFOs in the sky quite frequently out here. He also spoke to some Navajo folk that warned him about skinwalkers. He talks more of tales that he's heard from others about them, and they're pretty scary. At that time, I had no idea what any of this stuff was, and if I'm honest, I didn't really believe in it either. So we go back to work. I rewire some of the fences on the property line, and we start to maintain the grounds. This place is absolutely beautiful. Endless prairie with no mountains in sight. It's odd in Arizona of all places. It starts turning to dusk. My friend and I decide to have a smoke. We're having fun. We did some shooting that afternoon, so it was a nice way to end the day. The evening turns to night. We don't see any of these UFOs in the sky, but it is very quiet out there. All you can hear is nature. My friend asks me if I want to go on a walk around the property. I'm willing to do anything at this point, pretty much. We chat and goof off while smoking a couple contraband cigarettes. The fullest moon is casting a dramatic stage light to it all. It's basically a perfect setting. About half a mile out, we start talking about some dumb stuff. I don't remember exactly what, but you know the conversations that best friends can get into. And the weirdest thing happened. It was like the moon went out like a light switch. We'd look up for clouds, but it's kind of hard to tell given how dark it is. We resume what we're talking about, but kind of on edge now. The hair on the back of my neck stands up like needles. I look around, suddenly hyper aware. Seconds pass. It's deadly quiet now. My heart's thumping. I turn to look around for my friend. He's gone. I start looking around wildly, almost like a deer in the headlights. Then I hear a ringing bell from my right. I turn to see something in the darkness, resembling a coyote. I can barely make it out, but the more I look at it, the more it doesn't look like a coyote. Its legs seem longer than normal. I absolutely book it to the house. I'm panicked beyond belief. I can hear grass shifting behind me. It's chasing me. I was certain that it was something chasing me. The house seems miles away, but I get back to it in record time. I run into the house. I see my friend. He's just as panicked as me. His eyes are wide. He's leaning over a trash can, about to throw up from running. He just gags a bit and retches, but doesn't throw up. Then we sit down, and he asks me what happened, and he tells me something eerily similar to what I told him. He said that he was standing there, we were talking, and then it's like I wasn't there anymore. He didn't hear me or see me run, but he took off running because he saw something out in the darkness that wasn't me. And then, minutes later, I show up and I tell the same story, that we both saw something out there, and we somehow lost each other, and both of us got chased. The grandfather wakes up and asks us what happened. We tell him. He looks at us in disbelief. You saw one. We lock all the windows and doors in the house before going to bed. I don't feel safe whatsoever. We all sleep in one room together. We wake up the next morning. The power isn't working. We go outside to find the switch, but it's not responding. It seems that something has been sabotaged. It must have gone out over the night somehow. The grandfather says that he'll look at it the next time he's up here. That day, we left earlier than expected. Whenever I think about it too much, I can't sleep. I have nightmares about it. I don't know what to do from here, but I saw other people sharing their experiences, so this is mine. So, what'd you think of those? If you had a favorite one, let me know which one it was down in the comments. I hope you're all staying happy and healthy. I forgot to say that in the intro, but you know, the 3 H's of the channel, as it is. But yeah, do you have an encounter of your own? I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you want to. I also have a PayPal and a Patreon down there as well, if you would like to donate to the channel that way. No pressure though. And with that, I think I will see you in the next one, which will probably come out Sunday. Usually Wednesday and Sundays are when the videos come out. So, thank you for pulling up a stump. Make sure you're following the 3 H's, happy, healthy, and hydrated. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.